This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
No guest today, just me with a rant. I'll spend the first 6 minutes of the podcast today not talking about money, but don't worry, stick with it. There is a financial point to my ramblings today. I'm about to make a statement that you will disagree with. Ready? Here it comes. You live your life as if you live in a virtual world. That's crazy, you say. I don't live in a video game. I'm not wearing a virtual reality headset. I know I live in the physical world. I know I live in the real world. Really? Okay, perhaps you are one of the very few people alive today who are firmly grounded in the physical world. That makes you different than most people. Let me give you a few examples to prove that most people act as though they live in the virtual world. Example number one, social media. Have you ever heard of Twitter? Twitter has been in the news a lot lately. People getting banned, and Elon Musk buying it, and people getting unbanned, free speech, censorship, lots of issues. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm on Twitter. I don't use it much anymore because I don't like living in a virtual world. On Twitter, my username is @DougHoyes, which happens to be the same as my name in the real world. But for a very large number of users on Twitter, their username is something like @BigGuy79359. Why would you go on Twitter and not use your real name? Well, it may be that you're simply an observer and there's no need to reveal your true identity. That's fine. Or your reasons may be more nefarious. It may be that in a virtual world you can say whatever you want with no consequences. If I was to walk up to you right now in the real world and stand with my nose 2 inches from your nose and say, "You're a jerk," you'd probably tell me to screw off and you'd probably smack me in the face. As you should. I'm acting like a jerk, and in the real world, acting like a jerk has real world consequences. You get punched in the face. But on Twitter, no problem. You are nothing but a virtual being, so you can say whatever you want with no consequences. On Twitter, there are no consequences for being an obnoxious troll. Sure, you may get blocked, but no problem. It's a virtual world. All you have to do is set up another account and you have a new life and you're back in business. In the real world, you do something stupid and you're dead. In the virtual world, no problem. You just hit reboot and you start over. It's not just Twitter. On Instagram, we only post pictures of ourselves where we look good. It's not real, so we can pick the picture we want. On Facebook, you can get into an argument about politics or whatever and yell and scream and hurl insults with no consequences. No one can punch you in the face on Facebook because on Facebook your face isn't real. I guess they should call it not real Facebook. Or maybe they should call it Meta because it's not real, it only exists in the metaverse. Oh wait, Facebook did change their company name to Meta Platforms Inc. Freaky, eh? We are living in a virtual world. But it's not just social media that proves that you act as though you live in a virtual world. What about food? Yeah, I eat food, and all of the food I eat exists in the real world. What's my point? On Twitter, you believe you can say anything with no consequences. In the virtual world, you believe you can eat anything with no consequences. If we lived purely in the physical world, we would say to ourselves, okay, I know that if I eat crap, I'll feel lousy and I'll get sick and I'll gain weight and I'll get really sick and I'll shorten my life. That's bad, so I'm only going to eat healthy food. But of course, that's not what any of us do. We act as though we live in a virtual world, so if we want to eat a big bag of cookies, I can do it because in the virtual world, there are no consequences. I'm not criticizing you. Every year, since I was born, over the holiday season, I eat as many holiday cookies and treats as I can. I'm human, and I guess that proves that I also act as though I live in a virtual world with no physical consequences. I'll give you another example. Exercise. If you live entirely in the real world, you realize that the human body needs to move to survive. If you spend 24 hours a day sitting in front of a computer, wearing a virtual reality headset, your body will get weak, and you'll get sick, and, well, I guess you'll eventually die. If you live in the physical world, you get up, you move, you go for a walk, you lift stuff. So ask yourself this, how many hours each day do you spend in front of a computer or cell phone or tablet, and how many hours do you spend moving around in the physical world? Again, I'm not criticizing you. I'm an accountant. I work in an office. I spend my days in front of a computer or on the phone or doing video meetings with my clients. I get it. Right now, you are in front of some kind of virtual reality device, a computer, a phone, whatever, watching this video of me, or you are listening to me on some kind of electronic device. Right this second, we are both in the virtual world. And that's good because if we didn't have the virtual world, we wouldn't be talking right now. Okay, enough mindless rambling. This podcast is called Debt Free in 30, and I'm supposed to talk about money, so let's do it. We all live in the world of virtual money. Yes, we do. Again, I know what you're thinking. Virtual money? Oh yeah, you're talking about cryptocurrency. Well, yes, cryptocurrency is virtual money. You can't hold it in your hand. It only exists on a computer or some other virtual electronic device. But no, that's not what I'm talking about. And besides, isn't most money virtual? When was the last time you pulled a $20 bill out of your wallet to pay for something? Everything today is tap, 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 tap. Can't get much more virtual than that. But there is a lot more to virtual money than tapping a card. If you lived in a virtual world, how would money work? Well, I guess you could create virtual money in your virtual world. If you wanted to buy something in your virtual world, you would create the virtual money to do it. Let's say you wanted to buy a castle. Well, in a virtual world, you could create the money to buy it. In the real world, you need actual money, but if you don't have it, you can go to the bank and they'll lend it to you if your credit's good enough. If you want to buy shares of a big publicly traded company, your stockbroker will let you buy on margin. That means your stockbroker will loan you the money to buy the stock. How much will they lend you? Well, it depends on the value of the stock, but typical margin may be 50%. The stock costs $100, you put up $50, and the stockbroker lends you the other $50, and of course they charge you interest on the money you borrowed. Why won't they lend you the entire $100? Well, because if the stock drops in price, they want to be able to sell it to recover their money. Okay, here's another example. You want to buy a house. In the real world, you'd need to have the cash to buy it, or you'd need to find a lender willing to lend you the money. Would a lender be willing to lend you the entire purchase price? No, that's too risky. Why would they do what a stockbroker does and lend you half the price? Would they do that if you put up the other half? Well, no, in the real world, that would make sense, but in the real world, house prices can go up, but they can also go down. I told the story in my book, Straight Talk on Your Money, page 121. And if you're wondering, yeah, my book's still available in the physical world in paperback on Amazon, but you can also get a virtual copy on Kindle or listen to it on Audible. How thematically consistent is that? Enough with the commercial. Back to my story. In 1989, I bought a small townhouse just north of Toronto. A year before, a similar unit in the complex had sold for $275,000. I paid $205,000, so I assumed I got a great deal. Obviously, the market was way too high. It peaked and then fell, and I bought. I thought it was brilliant. Nope. The market had peaked, but that's not the same as bottoming. The market continued to fall, and I sold that townhouse almost 8 years later for a loss of $20,000. I was living in the virtual world where if I bought a house, it would go up in value. Unfortunately, in the physical world where the laws of supply and demand apply, houses can go down in value and they can go down for a long time. But that's not my point. My point is that if I want to buy a stock, which has a lot of risk, my stockbroker will only lend me half the price of the stock. But if I want to buy a house, I can buy a house with only a 5% down payment. You go to the bank and they say, yeah, no problem. We'll give you 20 times leverage. That's what a 5% down payment means. You put down 5 and the bank puts in 95. Cool. Now in the real world, that would be a very risky loan for the bank. If you don't pay the mortgage, the bank has to sell the house to recover their money. When they sell the house, they have to pay realtors' commissions and legal fees and other costs, which will be more than 5% of the sale price. So even if the bank can sell your house for exactly what you paid for it, they are guaranteed to lose money. Why would they make a deal like that? Because they also act as though they live in the virtual world. And banks do live in the virtual world. You see, if you buy a house with less than a 20% down payment, the bank requires you to have mortgage insurance. One of the biggest providers of mortgage insurance is CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It's a government agency. So the bank has no risk. If the house drops in value, no problem, CMHC covers the loss. That's why the bank is happy to give you 20 times leverage. The bank doesn't lose. But what about you? Well, the problem for you and me is that even though we act as though we live in the virtual world, we actually live in the physical world. In a video game, I can jump off a building and get back up and keep playing. In the physical world, if I jump off a building, I break my leg or worse. That's because in the physical world, actions have consequences. For the decade leading up to the spring of 2022, house prices always went up. If you owned a house and it went up in value, you could go to the bank, get a home equity line of credit, and use that money for the down payment on another house or a cottage or a condo. You could rent it out, and even though you were cash flow negative each month on your rental property, it didn't matter because house prices always went up. You couldn't lose. But then, in March 2022, the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve in the United States started raising interest rates, and the carrying cost of a mortgage went up, so people couldn't afford as high a price for a house, so house prices stopped going up as much, and then they started to fall. And in 2022, the Bank of Canada raised interest rates 7 times, and now mortgage rates are a lot higher, and the monthly mortgage payment required to purchase a typical home at current prices and current interest rates is now almost double what it was in late 2020. Double. When your mortgage payment doubles, you know you are living in the physical world. I talk to people every day and they tell me they had no idea that house prices would fall and that their mortgage payment would go up so much. They tell me that they were able to afford their line of credit payments when interest rates were low, but they can't afford them now that the interest rate they have to pay has doubled. When a recession hits and layoffs happen, people tell me they never thought they'd be the one to get laid off. But it happens. I'm not telling you all of these things to depress you. My point is this. Even though we act as though we live in a video game, we don't. Our actions have real-world consequences. If you have a lot of debt, you have to pay the interest. House prices don't always go up. An 8-year car loan may not be a good idea for a car that may only last you 6 years. So take a step back, take off the VR headset, ask yourself this important question. If I make that decision, what are the real-world consequences? Just because every other player in the video game is buying a big house and a fancy car and going on expensive vacations, that doesn't mean that I should do the same. I'm not playing a video game. This is real life. Does that sound depressing? Well, I guess if you want to carry a lot of debt, that is depressing. But here's the good news. The physical world is a great place to live. You can hang out with real people. You can eat real good food. You can go for a walk and see the buildings and the trees. It's the real world, so you probably want to wear a coat. I don't want you to catch a chill, but the real world is fun, so enjoy it. And always remember that in the real world, unlike a video game, every action has consequences, so think through the possible consequences in advance, and you may be able to avoid some of those real-world negative consequences. That's my rant for today. Next week, show number 435, Ted returns for our annual year-end prediction show. Guess what? Some of the predictions I made last year seem to indicate that I was living in a virtual world. I didn't get all of my predictions right. Oh well, actions have consequences. Next week, you get to hear where I was right and where I missed the mark. I'm fine with that. The prediction process helps me refine my thinking so I make fewer mistakes in the physical world. Please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get the alert as soon as each new show is posted. Thanks for hanging out in the virtual world with me. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.